As if they don't have too much on their plates. The Kings of Combat Sports Podcast, John and Wade. They'll talk about the things they did that day. They'll analyze the work of Vince and Triple H. Rewind to SmackDown. 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 Rewind to SmackDown.
Well, hello everyone. It is John Pollock and Wai Ting coming at you Friday night, which is something we do every Friday night, but I got a text from Wai who said, you know what? Let's do a free show on Friday night. And I said, okay, sure. So here we are, free for everyone, a sample of what you can have on Friday nights on the Post-Wrestling Cafe, where all the fun goes down. Wai.
I'm feeling generous today. End of the month, you know. People have been so good to us. The world has been so good to us. Here's a free show on Fridays.
I suggested let's put it on the highest tier possible, and Wai said no. He was I'm the Scrooge of the company. You are the Jacob Marley, I guess. Which I think is a compliment, but we didn't get too much backstory on Jacob Marley in A Christmas Carol.
I don't know if I've watched it the whole way through, so that reference completely just...
You've never seen A Christmas Carol?
Mm-mm. And I don't,
Dude,
yeah.
I've seen every iteration of A Christmas Carol. Dude, I've seen Jim Carrey play Scrooge.
Congratulations.
Alistair Sim seems to be everyone's favorite. George C. Scott is my favorite Scrooge.
Okay.
Moving on. This is what you're missing, folks, on Friday nights. But welcome one, welcome all. We have a lot of stuff that has been going on down on the site, and in particular on the cafe. Both on Thursday, where Wai and I sat back, we watched Hustle 3 from May of 2004. This is a bizarre industry that we cover that covers many gamuts of the industry, and it does go to the extremes of Hustle 3, featuring Generalissimo Takada.
Yeah.
Nobuhiko Takada himself, this being his fortress, Hustle, where we saw bookings of everyone from Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Mick Foley, Mark Coleman, Tiger Jeet Singh, Dusty Rhodes. If you could get on a plane, you had a chance of being booked on this show.
And we, our executive producer picked a really good edition because this was when Hustle was still in full spending, crazy, just completely reckless spending mode.
What are you talking about, reckless?
They just decided to pay crazy amount of money to bring Hall and Ash over, to face Hashimoto and Naoya Ogawa, for instance. Mick Foley getting paid one of the biggest paydays of his entire life to face Toshiaki Kawada, so that match is on this one as well. Quite the experience to watch a Hustle event. So do check it out. I hope you guys will enjoy the review.
Yes, and you will find out the story of how this booking came to be for Mick Foley just weeks after his Backlash match with Randy Orton, and more importantly, you will find out why this was the last time that Dusty Rhodes would ever work for Hustle. All of that on this show and more. PostWrestlingCafe.com. $6 gets you a month's access and a whole archive of Rewind-A. Plenty of bonus shows, including Collision Course that is coming your way late Saturday night after 3 hours of AEW programming with Kate from Montreal and John Cena.
As well. Currently right now out on the feed, if you scroll right beneath this one, if you're in the Post Wrestling Cafe, of course, X-Men 97 episode 7 just came out here. WH wasn't available to join Rich this week, but he got on Brandon Carr to talk about episode 7, and the two of them had a great discussion about a great series, really critically acclaimed, and many people describing it as one of the best Marvel TV things period going on right now. So weekly editions of this review as well in the Post Wrestling Cafe every week.
Yes. A lot of I don't know what I can say about X-Men, but I am all caught up. I'm aware of who's alive. I'm aware of who's dead, and I'm aware of the updated status of everyone now. A few some cameos in this latest episode. Have you watched the newest one?
I have. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all. That's all we can say. But there you go. Check out more on MCU later. And also this weekend, Long and Winding Royal Road and a new edition of Postmarks dropping, where David Myers and Bruce Lord speak to members of the post-wrestling community. This weekend, Andrew Thompson stopping by. The youngest in charge will be on with them. So lots of great stuff to check out this weekend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. And that's it. That's all we wanted to check in with and give you the update on. Oh, yes, we have plenty of news to get to, Wai. We're going to start off with the NFL draft, the thing that everyone was tuning in, the real draft this week. And Tony Khan featured all over NFL programming, selling his TK driver that he took on Wednesday's edition of Dynamite. This was featured on Thursday night, where he seemed to be kind of the comedic foil, I would say, for some of the broadcast, where they were showing him in his neck brace and having a lot of fun with this. They were explaining how he was pile driven into the mat on Wednesday night, and it seemed to be like this was like this fun story coming out of Thursday night's draft, which was at least on ESPN was seen by an average of over 12 million viewers. It was a very successful number for them. And then today they decided, I guess, well, you know what? Here was this fun story. We got all these hours of draft coverage. Let's have Tony Khan on for a couple of minutes. He can talk about the Jaguars. We can talk about this wrestling angle. Be a fun interview. So let's hear a portion of this fun interview that they got to conduct with Tony Khan for some light fodder in between all the heavy football talk.
We are the most successful sports startup since the AFL pre-merger. There has not been a challenger brand that has gained as much market share as AEW in many, many, many years. We are like the Pepsi of pro wrestling. Yeah. And we're up against a really evil juggernaut. WWE is our competitor. That's who we're facing. AEW, like the Pepsi of pro wrestling. WWE's like the Harvey Weinstein of pro wrestling. And I'm really proud of what we do down here. I think
So what you couldn't hear was the alarm bells inside of these two hosts' heads the second that, I would say, in almost any public situation, when you hear the name Harvey Weinstein, you are immediately, your back is up against the wall, which is kind of what I think these hosts felt at the moment. We're like, whoa, what are we stepping into here? This was supposed to be just a fun, silly wrestling interview, and it turned into this. And obviously this comment gaining a ton of traction, and it's one of those comments, where I think it's for the purposes of back and forth anger between fan bases. It is fuel for either side that can either look at this as a comment that is directed at a company that is under the midst of a sex trafficking lawsuit, or it is one that can be just, this is such a just like trivializing someone really, really heinous here in terms of just like a jab at your competitor, and you probably got just mountains of engagement as a result of this. Not to be lost on people, this is also coming at a time when the name Harvey Weinstein is back in the headlines after his 2020 rape conviction was just overturned on Thursday in New York. And now you're probably getting a lot of people that are tweeting about Harvey Weinstein with the letters WWE or the name Vince McMahon attached to that. I think that there's probably some of that thinking to it. I think that Tony absolutely leans into that kind of thought process here. Or are we giving too much credit here for what this was? And this was just a shot at WWE, and that's what he felt in the moment.
Yeah, I don't know how calculated this would have been. It maybe seemed to me more like a spur of the moment, top of mind type of thing for Tony. For one thing, Harvey Weinstein is not a competitor to Pepsi. Like, they're not even the same genre. So I don't understand maybe how that analogy works, other than, he was talking about evil corporations, and I suppose his mind directed himself to Harvey Weinstein. I think you're seeing a Tony Khan that is just kind of really looking for any attention towards AEW that he can get. And maybe, he's choosing to have fun with it. Like, I mean, this might have been his philosophy for promoting AEW the entire time. Clearly, like, even the Punk footage debate, to him, I'm sure has at this point become a net positive simply because people are talking about AEW. So sure, he'll go on the NFL draft and sell his ankle in order to get an interview so he could promote his TV show. He'll say like pretty outrageous things, like calling the WWE the Harvey Weinstein of pro wrestling. And as long as he can get a headline and get some attention for himself and also for his pro wrestling company, he'll see it as a positive.
I think that's the case. I think people get into these debates about, is this good publicity or bad publicity? I don't think Tony Khan really has too much of a care of what kind of attention it is, as long as there in the conversation and that the NFL Network is talking about an AEW angle that he is literally selling here as he is on here. I guess the question would be your takeaway here. And if, no, you can certainly state that this was a bad look for Tony Khan, but I don't think he really has that in mind. This is simply, here was a shot, and I'm sure he feels it's justified to fight fire with fire with WWE. Like, that's what the game is. I think it more so just outlines the kind of lines we're going to see thrown back and forth between one another. I just think it's kind of gross, though, when you're getting into, sexual assault cases and such, and they're trivialized for just one-liners to be thrown at people. That's my personal opinion on it.
So I don't think Tony is good at this. Like, I think he's exactly as I think he presents, which is like socially awkward, kid who has found himself in a position where he has to speak publicly, and he's not really the quickest nor like I think the wittiest when it comes to like these sort of one-liners. And you get kind of like awkward things that might come out, like using Harvey Weinstein as an analogy in the same sentence as Pepsi. It's just what you get out of him. Again, I don't know how calculated this was on his behalf, but it does maybe call more to sort of like a general philosophy he seems to have now of just getting as much attention as possible for AEW, good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you can state is that no one attached with AEW is getting on to a program like this other than Tony Khan because of the Jacksonville Jaguars connection. I guess your question is the... how did this broadcast feel about this interview that was designed to be probably just some lighthearted interview, and then you have this moment? Like, does this at all reflect badly on the Khan family, the Jacksonville Jaguars organization, that here is the owner's son that is doing his wrestling angles, and then he's invoking the name of Harvey Weinstein on this broadcast? That, I mean, you might not know anything about pro wrestling, and you hear that name, it's going to be very off-putting for people. Right. And the host seemed very uncomfortable as soon as that name was brought up here, and immediately moved to the next topic.
It's hard. I don't really, so I don't watch football, so I don't really know what the reputation of the Khans are as, like, personalities heading into something like this. Like, did this simply, accentuate whatever was already there, or did it create a new persona for Tony Khan to a football audience? I don't know. Like, something tells me maybe even the broadcast for this NFL Network might have even enjoyed some of the attention that a clip
the
like
wrestling
this received.
stuff. Listen, it might look goofy and stuff. Like, the clips I saw, like on the NFL Network, even on Pat McAfee's show, like, everyone was having like, they thought this was really entertaining, that here he is selling this angle. And again, I think he got onto this show the next day because here was like this weird sub story out of the first night of the draft that let's have fun with. I thought it was like, this was a PR win for Tony Khan going with the neck brace, and I didn't think it would be taken seriously. And not that they were taking it seriously, but they had a lot of fun with it, and it was a net positive, I think, for people coming out of night one. And now sort of it's not the fun story. It's like it's at least I would say to the wrestling audience, they're hyper focused on this shot at WWE. Maybe the greater audience is not paying as much attention.
We're spending 10 minutes talking about it, so I guess to Tony this is probably overall a positive. I'm guessing for him.
Well, we will move on to some other stories. The John Wall Street, which is a financial analysis site, they put out the number. They are reporting that WrestleMania 40 over 2 nights doing a gate of $38.5 million, which is up dramatically from the prior 2 years of 2-night WrestleManias. Because of the percentages, we knew that they were above. Brandon Thurston was able to ascertain what these actual figures are now that we have a actual figure here attached to the 2024 WrestleManias. So $38.5 million this year is up from $21.6 million last year for the 2 nights at SoFi Stadium, which is up from $15.6 million over 2 nights at AT&T Stadium. That is dramatic growth when it comes to ticket sales for this year's WrestleMania, and tells you of how much they had scaled the tickets for this year and what a successful event it was, and sort of what the what the barometer is going to be for future WrestleManias. And Brandon also did this rundown of every gate for WrestleMania in history and what the amount would translate into $2024. So, just like a stunning increase. The prior record for just a one-night WrestleMania had been in 2016 for the WrestleMania at AT&T Stadium, which did a paltry $17.3 million.
Just amazing. Like numbers that I just really can't compute in my head. And I guess if you're Ari, and you're probably pretty happy with the investment this quick.
AEW Dynamite on Wednesday. So this was the episode that was airing live across the country. So we knew it was going to have an impact, especially for the West Coast viewership, where it's starting at 5 o'clock local time. And overall viewership was hurt pretty significantly. It fell 10% this week to 683,000 viewers, which would be the lowest Dynamite since January the 6th of 2021, which you can Google what was going on that day in the U.S. For 18 to 49, though, they were down 9%, only their lowest since March the 27th. So not as steep a decline in comparison to overall viewership. Dynamite did finish 6th on cable behind the NHL playoffs and the NBA playoffs. But the peak in viewership was the opening quarter. The peak in 18 to 49 was, in fact, the final 15 minutes of the show, which was the end of the Moxley-Hobbs match and the angle involving Tony Khan and Jack Perry with 300,000 viewers. So at least in the 18 to 49 audience, I like the tease. They did tease it throughout the show that Tony Khan would have his in-ring meeting with Jack Perry. So it did grow the audience for that final quarter. And I guess this is a tough show to kind of guard. It was lower than I thought it would be. I knew they were going to take the hit with the West Coast viewership being affected, but it was hit more than I assumed it would be. But we will see how they bounce back. And they chose to do a pretty big angle on this show. And the inverse of this is that Saturday night's Collision could be one of their better Collision numbers to date, because they've got this huge lead in with the Miami Heat Boston Celtics game, and they've already announced they're going to start the show with Swerve Strickland doing kind of his championship address. So they're putting him front and center with probably a lot of eyeballs on that first segment.
Do they have any more of these?
I don't know. And they probably won't until their playoff schedule is known of, like, I'm sure there's going to be some others that are affected, but as of now, next week's show on TBS, it's a 3-hour block with Rampage, and I don't think that they're going to have this impact, but they will from time to time. I think that they will have this issue with the playoffs going on, and certainly Rampage is the show that's getting bounced around all over the place. But I mean, a week from Saturday, there's not going to be any Collision, which actually works out well for them. It's the same day as Backlash, and we know how traditionally Collision gets hurt on those days. Also worth noting, in Canada, they fell to 89,000 viewers. They were up against the Bruins-Leafs game that did, I don't have the number here. It was about 2.5 million viewers. There we go. 2.56 million viewers in Canada, which we're like a ninth the size of the population of the U.S. So you can do the math of what that would translate to in like U.S. figures, 2.56 million. Suffice to say, the Leafs in the playoffs are a major factor when it comes to the Canadian numbers. So there you have it on Dynamite. And as we mentioned, Collision, we have Swerve Strickland opening the show, the Bang Bang Gang against the Top Flight and Action Andretti for the Unified World Trios titles, the debuting Grizzled Young Vets in AEW taking on the Acclaimed. Non-title match, Anna Jay and Timeless Tony Storm. And then the Rampage portion will have the parking lot fight between Trent Barretta and Chuck Taylor, Deonna Purrazzo against Thunder Rosa. And again, Collision Course will follow them at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Their second night at Daly's Place this week.
That's right.
And the final thing we will note is this coming weekend, there's several big shows. Stardom has their All-Star Dream Queendom event in just a couple of hours at 2 a.m. Eastern Time. It's a pay-per-view on the PIA streaming service that we have a link to in my update today. And there will be English commentary available. Stuart Fulton is calling the show, and it's going to feature Micah and Momo Watanabe in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the World of Stardom title. Other top matches, Saori Anou against Hanan for the Wonder of Stardom Championship, and Mayu Iwatani, whose movie is coming out in just a couple of weeks, against Sarai for the IWGP Women's Championship. Aja Kong is working on the show. It looks like it's going to be a lengthy show, and we've got the best on top of it. Karen Peterson will have a report on the site Saturday going through the entire event, which is a pretty big one for Stardom. This is traditionally their big show of the year, but it comes at a time when there's a lot of change in Stardom and a lot of change in the entire women's scene in Japan. So we will see if this is kind of that card that kind of catapults them into their kind of next iteration after several departures. And of course, this their first major show without Rossy Ogawa.
And also, I don't know, the Bushi Road fight acquisition from New Japan Pro Wrestling has already taken place, but you assume
it goes into effect, I think, after this. But yeah, they're in the process of Stardom is going to be this will all be under New Japan now, and the idea is that New Japan and Stardom things will be more coordinated. I have asked some questions about this, and the big one, I think everyone, and they are aware of it too, especially the Western audience that would like to see the streaming component come together. I don't think any decision has been made on that, but I think there's more of a likelihood now than there was 6 months ago that, I think the idea is to try and have more crossover of audiences, not running the same weekends as one another, having more of a kind of centered view of these two companies not tripping over each other. So that seems to be where things are moving. But yeah, that's also in play. And the other big card on Saturday night is the first of 3 Triple Mania events this year, with a Triple Mania 32 streaming on Triller TV, headlined by Nick Nemeth and Alberto El Patron for the vacant AAA Mega Championship. Vampiro also on his retirement tour, his latest one, with Pagano and El Macias against Dark Cuervo, Dark Oz, and Cibernetico. And we've got Jeff Jarrett, who will be in the corner of Sam Adonis, Satnam Singh, QT Marshall, and Parker Boudreaux against Psycho Clown, Laredo Kid, Octagon Jr., and a mystery partner. And I'm sensing that Jeff Jarrett will be involved in some kind of angle. I don't think he's just coming down here just to be just for the manager's license, you would think. So maybe something involving Jeff Jarrett. But we get Satnam Singh at Triple Mania, no less.
Okay. All right.
So that's coming up on Saturday night. All right. All your news can be found at postwrestling.com. Lots of great stuff up there. Check out the wellness policy this week. Find out what Wai Ting's personality is.
Did you listen?
I'm making my way through.
Did you take the test?
I haven't taken the test yet. Should I?
I'd love to know what your personality type is.
I think everyone could probably guess my personality.
I wonder.
Okay. Well, a great show, as always. I always say the most soothing listen that we have on the network. I like to slowly make my way through the show. It's an enjoyable, relaxing listen, and I mean that sincerely.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
On to SmackDown tonight, Wai. The draft, night 1 of the draft. We have WrestleTix reporting 12,677 tickets out, a sellout at the Heritage Bank Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. And to go over the rules of the draft, we're going to have 4 rounds tonight and then 6 rounds on Monday. All the champions are protected except for the women's tag team champions. And SmackDown will get the first pick tonight. Raw gets the first pick on Monday. And the rosters go into effect the Monday after Backlash on May the 6th. And we get the return of the War Rooms, where we get a split screen. And as silly as these War Rooms are, the reactions during the War Rooms, I mean, they will never get these right. They always look so comical. And tonight was no exception.
I at least felt these were better than having the robots and the network mascots doing pre-taped reactions that had nothing to do with I don't know, people reacting to Tamina getting drafted, for instance. These were at least appropriate, and you can tell they were reacting to the specific people that were being drafted because they were updating the board as they were going along. Neat to see, some of these legends being consulted, I suppose. What sort of stake, I wonder, does Bully Ray have in the success of SmackDown?
Yeah, that's where him and Devon come to a split. They're not brand loyal to one another's choice.
I guess
going really harkens back to the very first draft when they were split up.
That is correct. Well,
was Bubba on Raw?
Yeah,
he was on Raw.
They're reversed. Yeah.
Well, we can try. They should have put Bubba in the War Room then. The other War Room. The Raw is War Room. They could have. Okay.
Yes,
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So Kayla is with Paul Heyman and asks about the rumors about Roman Reigns, and we find out that Roman Reigns has voluntarily removed himself from eligibility after building up SmackDown since the pandemic. He is the biggest star and will not hog the first pick when he isn't returning anytime soon. How generous. And Heyman says that's not what a real tribal chief would do. And now, who is Nick Aldis going to draft first? And Paul Heyman is intrigued by this. So, yes, no Roman Reigns in the draft. So he's just going to be left lingering, as are many that were not included in this. I mean, you had some of them, it's like they're injured, so they're not involved. Others were like Seth Rollins. He was part of the draft, but Rhea Ripley isn't. Jimmy Uso is not listed on either night either. So, like, it seems to be who do we have storyline plans for and who do we not?
Yeah. I suppose like what's noteworthy about this interaction is that you had Heyman basically saying Roman Reigns wasn't set to appear on television anytime soon. Take that for whatever it should mean. Could mean as long as 2 weeks from now. Could mean as long as next year. I mean whatever. It also of course keeps the mystery of whether he's with Solo alive as part of the new bloodline. I'm sure the people at present were disappointed though, because this was almost like advertising that you would get some sort of Roman Reigns appearance, but you did not.
Jackie Redmond is stationed at the Performance Center where the entire roster is stationed there to watch the coverage. And typically what they've done with the NXT ones is like these people are watching this and they're getting their real reactions if they get drafted. And I think tonight was no exception with the NXT draft. And there were also fans in here. I thought this part was really cool that they had set up here.
Yeah.
Where this felt like, when you have a draft party and, the big pick is surrounded by all his family and friends. And this was like an exaggerated version of that where you had basically their mini arena here.
In the past, they would just have the Performance Center and like chairs all sort of like in a row and people watching. You wouldn't necessarily have the crowd surrounding them in the background. And I think it does add a lot. It's too bad
God bless these fans that they convinced to come out to watch SmackDown.
It's too bad this wasn't a show where you had many of those reactions. In fact, I think you really just had one particular reaction. So all this set up for that one reaction. Hopefully on Monday we'll see this taken advantage of a little bit more.
Corey Graves is in the ring to moderate the contract signing between Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles. Big reaction for Cody. And Styles reminds us we're both from Georgia. And he said he doesn't respect LA Knight, but he got under my skin. I lost at WrestleMania, but then I got my composure back, realized I'm phenomenal, and I beat LA Knight to earn the title shot. Basically stating the WrestleMania result was meaningless. He respects Cody. Both had to prove themselves outside of WWE and mentions the advice he received from Dusty Rhodes about having to stand on his own 2 feet. He learned a lot from that man. He taught me how to carry myself and carry myself as a champion. And he says that the weight of the gold is more than just the leather and the gold. And we're going to see if Cody can carry this belt at Backlash. Cody says, respect goes by the wayside at Backlash. This is not a dream match for me. It's a must win. And Cody offers his hand, but AJ says it's a shame that your title reign is going to end at Backlash, to which many chuckled. And they shook hands. Backlash next Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, this has been a very quick build. And it was like almost like a fine microwave setup for a title match here in a segment like this. They tried to give us a little bit more substance here by talking about what AJ explaining like his ties to Dusty. But I mean, at this point,
when in doubt, we've got one promo to build this matchup. We're going with Dusty.
Honestly, at this point, who doesn't have ties to Dusty when they're facing Cody Rhodes? It feels like every one of Cody's opponents has something related to Dusty Rhodes. So I don't know.
I'm sure the TNA Twitter, which is the fastest Twitter account in the industry, had that AJ Dusty match out there.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
It is an interesting fact that you've got like a rarity of someone that has worked with both and would have worked with Dustin too. But I mean,
I guess so. But everybody who came out of the PC of like the prior generation has worked with Dusty and has some sort of tie to Dusty. So it doesn't make this one feel that special. But ultimately, this is supposed to be really just an exhibition match, right? For Cody's first title defense. It's a pretty predictable result either way. So
if this was a pay-per-view, this probably would not be the match. But it's not a pay-per-view, and it's always the toughest challenger to create and this one is that much more when this has been one of the longest waits to crown a champion. And I mean, it's just listen, I think they're gonna have an excellent atmosphere in France. They're gonna have a great match, and you'll be satisfied with it afterward, and it does not harm my interest in it. But that it is what it is. Like, you weren't gonna be able to put a challenger together here that is going to have that kind of viability. AJ's in the role here to solidify Cody as the champion. It's not an easy role to be in.
Yeah. And at the very least, the match itself is a draw. The in-ring is a draw regardless of the storyline. I guess that, I also find it curious, like they didn't really hit on the Bullet Club connection a whole lot. They were in they never interacted as part of the Bullet Club, but there was a time where it felt like anybody who had any sort of Bullet Club affiliation, they were trying to make a big deal out of it. But I guess that's not a big deal these days either.
I don't know how much, it would be. I mean, if they got Dusty in the Bullet Club, where their thought is. Uh-huh. So we go to the first set of picks for the first round because Paul Levesque comes out and he just brings Cody along to read the picks. And Paul gives this deep explanation that with every pick you make to enhance your roster, you're also risking losing one of your own roster members. It's like, okay, yes. It's pretty philosophical. So the first overall pick, Bianca Belair going to SmackDown. Jey Uso drafted to Raw. These are the first two picks in the whole draft. Carmelo Hayes is third going to SmackDown. And fourth is Seth Rollins staying on Raw. And this became a bit of a challenge later of even Corey Graves of, man, what a get for this brand. Or should I say, keeping this person. And dude, when Sheamus was drafted to Raw, like news to me that this guy was on SmackDown. I was like, haven't I just watched him on Raw the last couple of weeks?
Was he on SmackDown, really?
Well, they said he was going to Raw.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. At least of this crop, really, it's maintaining the status quo with the exception of Carmelo Hayes, who I guess at this point is officially drafted to SmackDown. But I thought it was notable that they gave Bianca Belair that first spot, being the top pick for everybody, I suppose, at least as part of this crop. I think that was like a nice thing to give her. Jey Uso being drafted above Seth Rollins is also interesting in that, like, I think Jay's the one challenging for your championship, and maybe he should be first drafted. But it's a nice little.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because obviously Raw looking at, hey, let's draft Jay. We might be getting the next world champion. Not that same confidence in AJ Styles.
Was he wasn't available?
Yes, he was. He got drafted like in the third round.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, oops.
So,
well, maybe the not that convincing, AJ, unfortunately. But yep, that's it.
Carmelo walks out, and there's a loud chant of "Whoop that trick," and he hears Cody stating, "If you come for the king, you best not miss." Well, when I shoot, I don't miss, and he wants to shoot his shot tonight. And Cody teases the crowd, "Do you guys want to see that?" And turns out they did, and wouldn't you know it, they had a free quarter hour at the end of the show. They had nothing booked for the last 15 minutes, and they got to put in Cody Rhodes and Carmelo Hayes into the main event to be announced here. Rey Mysterio and Dragon Lee against Angel and Berto. We saw a tope con hero by Dragon Lee onto Berto, and then Lee gets dumped to the floor as they go through the commercial. Rey's in, code red onto Angel. Berto makes the save, and then there's a double underhook by Rey, and Angel is like supposed to be thrust into the corner, but he kind of like lands on his feet, and he's just got to launch himself onto the middle rope and then eat the 619, and then the Project Dragon by Dragon Lee for the win in 5:28. 5.5 minute match, 3 of which was in the commercial break. And then Santos and Elektra Lopez walk out. Santos says, "I'm a lot of things, but I am not a liar." And he denies attacking Dragon Lee before WrestleMania. And Lopez, for weeks, has been tracking down the security footage. So, man, there has been a preponderance of security footage that people have come into contact with over the last little while. And boy, did we get some damning security footage here. Not even announced in advance. Like, they could have built this up for a week.
Definitely, yeah.
And there, this footage, amazingly, where these security cameras are centered perfectly in frame. Carlito is seen attacking Dragon Lee. And somehow in all this, Dragon Lee's back is turned the entire time, so he's never seen who attacked him. And then Carlito, like, exits the door, comes back in as, oh my God, Dragon Lee, what happened to you? And Rey Mysterio can't believe this. And Carlito just attacks both of them and hits Lee with the backstabber. And then he runs. He just runs through the crowd. And that was our big culmination to this angle. It kind of just felt like, okay, this has run its course. We got to get to the heel turn, and that's what we did here.
Yeah. It felt. I definitely thought there'd be a little bit more mystery in the reveal here. But this was about as direct and as unimaginative of a reveal as they could have come up with. You know, like all of a sudden, hey, I found the footage, and here it is. No kind of real dangling whatsoever. No real building of intrigue. In overall, I'll say, like, it, at least up until this point, this entire angle has really not been that interesting. I do look forward to seeing what a Carlito does as a heel, but man, I've been kind of disappointed by this reveal.
If it was me, though, in this security footage, you know, I would have had Gregory Helms in a magenta shirt just walk. That would have been just the kicker. I would have loved it. Missed opportunity. Bron Breakker against Cedric Alexander. There's more Cedric, man. I don't know if this guy's getting drafted. Cedric goes for a handspring and gets speared. He gets pinned in 17 seconds. So Bron Breakker, they think that his odds of being drafted just went up after this 17-second win. You know, if this guy can hang with Cedric Alexander, let's get him drafted immediately. So,
yeah, believe he had some new music here as well. With some dog barking in the background, followed by some face melting riffs.
Awesome. Some
riffs.
Dog-faced EDM. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of a showcase for Bron, who we haven't really seen on SmackDown in a while.
Nick Aldis meets with Tiffany Stratton, and she's bragging about laying out Bayley and Naomi last week, and Aldis nearly sent her to the back of the line, but instead, she's getting a number one contenders match because Bayley wanted it. So it's Naomi against Tiffany tonight. The winner gets Bayley at Backlash. Tori Wilson and I wrote Michelle Wilson here, who was the former president of the WWE, but I meant Michelle McCool. That would have been something if Michelle Wilson and George Barrios came in here for picks. Did you notice this? That for just about all of them, they assigned them all the exact same exit from the war room. They come out of the room, they stop, they look down, and then they have to make a facial like, yeah, I know the pick. And then they walk like everyone had to do this. It's like watching robots come out of this war room. It's like, I have seen my pick. Yes, good pick.
Yeah, I imagine they had to rehearse this like several times, perhaps.
Well, the first pick in the second round, as drafted by SmackDown, Randy Orton. Big reveal here. Then we have Bron Breakker going to Raw. So there goes those months of contract negotiations for Nick Aldis landing this guy. Adam Pearce played the long game and got him. Number 7, Nia Jax. And number 8, Liv Morgan are the draft picks here.
Mm-hmm. So Nia Jax, really the only substantial move here. You know, she gets to go from Raw to SmackDown and opens up a whole lot of other matchups for her. You know, she's somebody who I think is actually used really well on Raw as somebody that you can always depend on to be a big obstacle for any babyface or even heels in your division. And so her move to SmackDown opens up her, obviously, programs now with Bayley that might be coming up. Also, potentially Bianca and Jade if those two stay on SmackDown.
And Wade and Corey Graves are stunned that the Bloodline has not been picked yet. But then a vehicle pulls up in the back, and Paul Heyman at first forgets to open the door for Solo Sikoa and apologizes. Sikoa is informed they have not been drafted yet. tell me the details. And Heyman explains that Reigns withdrew from the draft, and Sikoa is adding new members to the bloodline, and therefore no one knows what they're getting when they pick the bloodline. It's like, is that too much of a problem? Like, we might have more people than we knew we were drafting. Like, we drafted you 2, and we're now getting 3 guys. Is that?
Well, I mean, I always feel like there's I don't think it's ever an issue of like, you know, you're getting value per draft. I mean, I always in my mind feel like there's a budget cap, and you're not just drafting people and you're getting them for free. You have to pay them all. So why would you want extra people that you might not want on your show?
I guess so. Yes. That could be it. So Sikoa,
like, why wouldn't you just draft tag teams if you're looking for more bodies?
I would just state. Well, I mean, at the very least, why wouldn't they want Solo Sikoa? Like, wouldn't he be of value?
I think it's a great question. I think it's more of an interesting question for why they would decide to like create this scenario at all, because they're basically telling the audience, hey, the bloodline minus Roman Reigns now is of completely like low value to
they're a 3rd round pick
to the benefit of this show. So now what does that tell you about, you know, how we're supposed to perceive Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga? You know, they're positioning the bloodline as a pretty worthless group without Roman.
So as he's getting all of this explained, Solo tells him, repeat what you just said to Tama. And Paul Heyman's like, really? You didn't just hear that? And we don't have to hear it a second time, because Kevin Owens jumps Tama Tonga, the MFT, and they start brawling. So we cut to Kayla in the arena to bring out Bianca Belair, and they announce that it's going to be Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill challenging the Kabuki Warriors at Backlash for the women's tag titles. Belair is hopeful that Jade is going to be drafted to SmackDown. She is eligible on Raw and says Jade is the perfect person to help me end things with Damage Control. It's fallen apart piece by piece, and the tag titles are the last piece of the puzzle before Damage Control crumbles. So the Kabuki Warriors come out, they hold up their titles, and they just start yelling back and forth. So then Jade comes out, so we have an even argument.
Mm-hmm.
And they just this is our setup for the match. They argued, and the match is happening next weekend.
Yeah. I guess about as much as you can have typically. Like, they really have not made too much of an effort to like.
They all promised Tony Khan no physicality.
Well, I was gonna say for the Kabuki Warriors, they've really made very little effort in trying to like have them communicate. You know, they typically just kind of come out and scream or dance, and that's about as much build. They might have occasionally Dakota speak for them, but beyond that, that's kind of it. Is there a chance that Jade doesn't get drafted to the same show as Bianca?
I hope they keep them together. I think they've got a good run as a pair here, and then later as opponents. And to your point, I think Jade and Nia is a natural match to do at some point when they're ready to go that direction.
Yeah, even though they're going for the women's champion titles, and these are the only titles that can go, across different brands. I
could see them winning these belts.
Yeah, I can. I'm just saying, even though they might win these championships, which would allow them to be split up onto different brands, I see them keeping Jade and Bianca on the same show, along with Naomi.
So as they are a mid-shouting match, Kevin Owens and Tama Tonga brawl their way out from backstage into the arena and into the ring. Sikoa joins in, so they had the advantage when Randy Orton makes his way out in his trunks, just shows up at the arena, gets in his trunks just to be on standby as always. Like, he's not in his, casual clothing. And Sikoa escapes an RKO attempt, and there's a big pull apart between all of them, and we would get the match announcement later for Backlash with the tag match. So we'll get to see the MFT in France.
Still don't know what it stands for. We'll find out soon, I think. Yeah. Maybe it's French.
Could be.
Mon frère Tama.
Mon frère. Bubba and Devon come out, huge ECW chant, and they did a funny bit here where they couldn't read the cards, so they had to put on their glasses. And we get LA Knight drafted to SmackDown. Ricochet staying on Raw, I think.
Yes.
The Bloodline gets drafted 11th overall, staying on SmackDown, and Sheamus, we learned, was on SmackDown and is now moving to Raw. Breaking news to me. How will SmackDown recover?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, pretty much everybody's staying put here. Nothing, no news to break. It kind of just kind of spells out, the entire show, which is a couple trades, overall.
Tiffany Stratton and Naomi with Bayley on commentary. We saw Naomi drill Stratton onto the edge and then came off the apron with like the splits and came down on Stratton as they go to the break. Naomi tried a sunset roll up and then a head scissors, smashing Tiffany into the mat. And then Nia Jax appears out of nowhere and starts attacking Bayley ringside at the desk. So Naomi goes after Jax and is thrown into the post. Match is thrown out at 6:21. And then Jax leaves Naomi and Bayley laying. So Stratton rolls both in and once again hits both with the prettiest moonsault ever.
Yeah.
Just
to build.
Yeah.
Build to the three-way here. You got your first little bit of Nia interacting with Bayley, so that's probably Bayley's next program. I mean, honestly, all the builds to these championships aren't doing so much for me, but it's nice that they're giving the spotlight to both Naomi and Tiffany Stratton here.
Yeah, really, in terms of the wrestling on this show, until the Cody match, like nothing had time. It was like so much was just crammed into it, like fitting around commercial breaks and such, that I really can't say any of the three matches stood out. And I mean, the main event was, even beyond short by main event standards.
Even beyond the in-ring on this particular edition of SmackDown, I think the feuds heading into Backlash don't really feel all that special.
It's just a thrown together show in some ways. Byron interviews the Street Profits and B-Fab, and they will be challenging A-Town Down Under next Friday on SmackDown, which is also from France. And Theory and Waller enter, and they make fun of the Cincinnati Bengals, which Dawkins is very upset by. And then Bobby Lashley just pops up at the end of this. So thanks for showing up, guys. And they're all eligible on Raw.
Why did they have Lashley show up at the end?
I had no idea. He wasn't there for the whole segment, and then he just pops up at the end, like he was legitimately late or something.
I wonder if they're teasing something there. Like, are we going to see a breakup of this team, or are they to be drafted together in the same draft?
I guess. Yeah,
I think they're listed together as
they
the
are.
Pride.
I shouldn't speak. I don't know 100% if they are. I imagine they're all together.
All right.
Teddy Long and JBL are out for the final picks, with AJ Styles to SmackDown, Alpha Academy staying on Raw, Andrade is moving to SmackDown, and then the final pick, Kiana James from NXT, is drafted to Raw. And this was cool because they got, first of all, they go to the Performance Center and she's interviewed fully out of character, where you totally buy that she got this news like everybody else did, and just saying how surprised she was. She's grateful. And they replay the announcement of when her name was announced and the reaction inside the Performance Center. I always like when they do these with the NXT ones, because again, they come off like very genuinely like surprised for these moments. And yeah, that was interesting that, Kayla was involved in like with Izzy Dame on NXT. She was certainly not one that I was looking at, but I mean, there's some that, she's a strong character, and I would say the strongest stuff was the program she had with Brooks Jensen that went on for a number of months. And yeah, of late she's just been involved with the team with Izzy.
Yeah, not a name that I would have thought for at least like this early, like to be the only name realistically, out of the NXT class that didn't already have some sort of teasing of being drafted up. In fact, like I almost thought it was kind of interesting to see Lyra Valkyria standing right here next to her as like Shawn Michaels is congratulating Kiana James, because I thought for sure she would be, at least first. But we do have another half of several more picks to go on Raw, so we'll see who joins her.
And then we have Kayla with Nick Aldis, who makes the announcements of the women's title match for Backlash and Owens and Orton against the Bloodline for Backlash. Kofi Kingston
Teddy Long joined him.
Yeah, they got Teddy Long to announce the tag team match. Yes. Kofi Kingston was at the NFL draft, and next week on the show from France, we got the contract signing tonight. So next week it's a face-to-face between Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles.
I mean,
like how many?
Like what the fuck? It's the same shit as a press conference. Are they really that low on content? for these two. I mean, it'll be in France, so that'll be different.
Yeah, maybe they'll have to speak in French. That would be great.
Would be very amusing. Yes.
Oh, hell. Could you imagine AJ Styles?
Bonjour.
Bonjour. A-Town down against the Street Profits. The tag titles. AOP against the New Catch Republic. And the first ever RKO show. That's kind of a clever name.
RKO. Yes.
Yeah.
RKO,
Kevin Owens will speak French. I think that's a guarantee.
Oh, I think so too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then our main event is Cody Rhodes against Carmelo Hayes. So they had just under 9 minutes here with the commercial break. And, they didn't have a ton of time, but you could see the idea here was to establish Carmelo Hayes as a guy that is at least a player on SmackDown between the high draft pick and then, not really having Cody in doubt here, but nonetheless giving him more than you would, this wasn't just a run through or something. So, Carmelo hits the fadeaway DDT for a 2 count, and then Hayes pops off the shoulder, and he teases his own crossroads that Cody counters and lands a big disaster kick followed by a Cody cutter, and Hayes kicks out, and Cody can't believe this. So then we have a spot where Hayes hits the first 48, but nothing but net gets avoided by Cody. So we have Hayes try for the fadeaway off one side of the ring, and Cody tries for the Cody cutter off the other side of the ring, and they just fly past each other in midair. And I thought this was going to get a bigger reaction, but it really didn't. But it was an idea.
See, I wasn't sure if they were supposed to collide, because it felt a little bit awkward in the aftermath with the silence, and I think the crowd expecting a bit more impact. So
I guess so.
I don't know what this was supposed to be.
Kind of would have hurt if you one going backwards. They were both going backwards. I mean, if they had connected, it probably wouldn't have been smooth. But yeah, it was an idea. And after the miss, Cody then gets control of him and just hits one clean crossroads in 8:42. Gave some words of encouragement to Carmelo, and you see him staring off at Cody. And they had 3 minutes left here. You almost thought he was going to jump Cody or something, but Cody's celebrating, and then bonjour. AJ is in the ring to confront him, and we get a preemptive face-to-face before the real face-to-face as they exchange words, and then they shake hands at the end. It's oh, wow, I can't wait for these guys to just go at it next week. And that's how we ended here. So, listen, Backlash is a show that I think if you're WWE's riding a wave that you can do shows like this. And listen, I think it'll be a good show, but it's just... It's way too soon, I feel, just to be coming back for a pay-per-view. But it's the PLE era where you're not being asked for $50 here, and that's why.
Well, you're guaranteeing a really, really hot crowd in France.
Yes.
To me, that's actually the biggest draw. Is to see what we hear so much about these house shows in France and these rosters raving about these crowds.
Which is
wait.
Paris, but we're not. They're not Paris proper, but yeah. I mean, that to me is the draw too. Is this audience? Watch this audience is just sitting on their hands.
No, they're gonna go nuts for Damian Priest versus Jey Uso. Okay, Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles. They're gonna treat it's the continuation of the story.
Do you have the lineup in front of you?
So far, yeah, we've got Bayley versus Naomi and Tiffany Stratton. That was just announced today as well. The Kabuki Warriors versus Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill for the women's tag championships, and then your Randy Orton and Kevin Owens versus the Bloodline match. That's already 5 matches. So
I'd be totally satisfied if it was a 5 match. Maybe they're gonna add one more. I would totally be happy if this was the lineup.
Do you think we get a Sammy match? Sammy.
Oh
Reed?
yeah, Sami Zayn and Bronson Reed probably gets thrown on there. So maybe that's a 6th that gets on there.
Yeah, certainly a come down. When you're talking about WrestleMania compared to maybe a card like this, maybe it's inevitable. When you're trying to rebuild and you're getting so many people, it's not like you're gonna get The Rock. You're not even getting Roman Reigns on a show like this. But it's going to be in France, and I'm sure they're going to do very well business-wise, and I hope to at least see a really lively crowd. But yeah, this edition of SmackDown for this draft, I mean, maybe I should have had a closer look at who was available, but man, nothing. What ultimately did we get here? We got Nia traded to SmackDown. We have Sheamus to Raw. Hardly game-changing anything here. it was just a show that pretty much confirmed like everybody's statuses, the status quo of like half of this roster or most of this roster. Now, who wasn't drafted is always interesting.
Oh, that's a good point. So just scanning this, Isla Dawn and Alba Fyre did not get drafted. We have Shayna Baszler didn't get drafted.
Cedric, Alexander, and
Gallows and Anderson, Mia Yim, Zoey Stark,
Adonis. Man, I forget his name.
Ashante.
Ashante, thank you.
And Ivar didn't get voted.
Ivar might have gotten drafted to NXT. Honestly, some of these guys are probably getting drafted to NXT. I guess Gallows and Anderson might be. They just might be staying in NXT at this point. Stark and Baszler as well.
Yeah. Stark and Baszler. So Monday, the pool has DIY as a unit, Apollo Crews, Braun Strowman, who is set to come back, Bronson Reed, Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell together, Chelsea Green and Piper Niven, CM Punk, the Creed brothers, Damage Control, which is all 4 of them together, Drew McIntyre, The Final Testament, which is all of them, including Paul Ellering and Scarlett, Giovanni Vinci, who is not paired with Imperium, Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser are a pairing on Raw, Jade Cargill, The Judgment Day, which is Balor, Mysterio, and JD McDonough, but Damian Priest is protected, so he will be on Raw, Caden Carter and Katana Chance, Kevin Owens, Legado del Fantasmo, the LWO, which up to now still includes Carlito, but maybe that will change. That's 5 people right there. Naomi, Natalia, the New Catch Republic, the New Day, Odyssey Jones, Pretty Deadly, Shinsuke Nakamura, Tegan Knox, The Pride, Bobby Lashley, Street Profits, and BFAB all together, and Tiffany Stratton.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping for Monday to be a bit more eventful. This was a pretty disappointing, like what often kind of gets equated to like a season premiere type of show for WWE. It didn't really feel that way, and the matches themselves weren't that much of a draw.
See this graphic also, it's got Ivy Nile, which is not, she is not listed here, and I wonder if she's paired with the Creeds.
Well, maybe she withdrew the way Roman Reigns did.
Oh, sorry, Ivy Nile is paired with the Creeds on this list. I missed it. So yeah, she's with the Creeds.
Okay then. All right.
Okay, well, there you go. That was night 1 of the draft. And now, if you are a member of the cafe, you have the opportunity to call in because Friday nights is when we always do go to calls. So we will hand the show over to you with your thoughts on the draft and any other news from the week that you want to discuss.
Let's head to our first call here. Let's go to Muggin. Hey, Muggin.
What's up, y'all?
Muggin, you've been drafted to Rewind-A-SmackDown.
Ooh, should I get my hat?
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, I didn't have that many. I didn't have that high expectations for tonight's for part 1 because, I mean, not much in the way of major sweeping changes, but there are many. But but some of the moves I did like. I mean, I love that they're keeping Braun and Melo separate because keeping them both on one show just isn't going to work.
Are you expecting these rosters to be kept much more separate than we have been, than what has been the norm?
I mean, I would like to see. So I'd like to see trades after the draft. Because typically in the previous regime they didn't really bother to try to have the GMs put their heads together for requesting trades. Because I remember 20 years ago when Triple H got drafted to SmackDown, and by the following week I think it was Kurt Angle who requested three other talents for Triple H, or maybe it was Bischoff. I'm not sure, but they would trade 3 people for 1 person, and maybe they could do that to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I like that. I mean, if Bianca's staying on SmackDown, I mean, I'm pretty sure Jade is going to stay put as well, considering the fact that they're going to be, they're going to go for the tag titles on Saturday. Because as long as the tag titles, women's tag titles are floating around, it's like their hall pass to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the reason they're hopping between all 3 shows. So I'm glad they're keeping that intact. Not much in the way of wrestling tonight, but I mean, I did like Cody versus Melo. I thought it was a good showcase for him, despite the little botch at the end.
What do you think they were going for with that spot at the end?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, it did remind me of Ricochet and Carmelo Hayes from Worlds Collide, but that spot was far better than this one. I think, but because Ricochet's timing was far better than Cody's, and I thought it was good. There was going to be a 4-way for the women's championship in France, but they're sticking with the triple threat because I keep forgetting that the new rosters don't go into effect till after Backlash. So
yeah, and plenty of time to build to a Nia challenge as well.
Totally. And what else? I'm expecting Ilya Dragunov to move on Monday. I'm expecting that to happen.
To move. And, do you see him as part of Imperium or separate?
Look, listen. Just because they got rid of Vinci doesn't mean that Ilya should take his place. I mean, there's plenty of heels for Ilya to work with on Raw.
I'm ready for Imperium to just go. I would like to see Kaiser try out on his own, but
yes, me personally,
they might just like the act and want to have just an updated version of it. Yeah.
Me personally, I like to see Kaiser I like to see Kaiser strike out on his own while still being with Gunther, because I feel like with Sami Zayn as Intercontinental Champion, I mean that'll give Kaiser an opening to pursue that while Gunther can pursue the big title.
Yeah.
So those two can stay together, but they each pursue their own individual goals, considering that Gunther's going to be in the King of the Ring. And for me personally, I mean, there's plenty more heels on Raw for Ilya to work with. I mean, for me, I would love to see Ilya and Drew McIntyre. That is a bona fide banger if they do that. I mean, him versus Sheamus would be good. Him and Seth once he recovers. Him and Gable, Ilya versus Gable. Now that since Gable turned this week, that's a good feud for him to have.
A lot of great matchups potentially. Thank you very much, Megan. Appreciate the call.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Let's go up next to Eric. Welcome, Eric.
Gentlemen, good to speak with you.
Likewise. Thanks for calling again.
I just wanted to say I go to a lot of movies. I like a movie theater movie, and I have not seen an entertaining film in a while. So I was particularly intrigued. I saved your Hustle review on Rewind-A until I got a chance to go back and watch the show, because it looks like the kind of entertaining mess that the movie theaters have not been providing lately.
It was cinematic in many ways, I suppose. Did you get
Pro Wrestling's answer to Dune 2?
Did you get a chance to actually watch the event?
I am saving it for tomorrow. I had a busy work week, but it's my catch-up day tomorrow. So looking forward to watching it and hearing your review. So I just had a quick thought on SmackDown that I wanted to get your feedback on. Was it feels like this is a big next 6 months for Jey Uso, just as an in-ring performer, because I think the number one draft pick moniker, the main event nickname, they've done everything possible to get him over and have done a great job with live crowds, as you guys have pointed out when you've talked about his reactions. But I do think in the same way the LA Knight, is sort of maybe not putting together all the tools to be a champion or doesn't have the ring work to be a champion. I'm wondering where you see the next few months for Jey Uso. If, as expected, I wouldn't expect him to win the championship, in France. And so I was curious about your view on his in-ring work right now and where he could be going.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of WrestleMania, one of the headlines of the weekend was how disappointing that particular match was, and he's kind of owned up to the mistake in interviews, or I shouldn't say mistake, but the reaction in interviews. So I think this match with Damian Priest, he has actually a lot to prove. But he has already a decade plus of great wrestling. Now, as a single star, I still do think he needs to maybe prove a bit more consistency, and ultimately that might hold him back from being in a top spot. But already he's already very much in a, he's a guy that is a very capable title challenger. Can he graduate to the level of somebody that you can see as an actual champion? That will probably take a little bit more work, and it'll take him reaching another level that we hope might come at some point this year.
Yeah, John, your thought?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Wai said, I think that he is someone that they're obviously positioning to be kind of that was sort of the handoff from Cody. This is your show now, and they're going to, emphasize him as probably like we'll see what the rosters shake out to be, but he's going to be at worst among the top baby faces on Raw. And I think you can gradually get him up there. I think it would be kind of like shell shock to get him, into main title picture immediately. Like there's no rush to get him to that. I think an IC title level would be fine for him. Like he's already a merch mover. I think that he already has a lot of connection that few baby faces have on the brand, either brand at this point. So I don't think you have to like race to make sure that this guy is a main event quality baby face tomorrow. But I think you can slow roll it, and the hope would be that 6 to 8 months from now that it really gels and people accept him into a higher role. So I see him being a major focus for this year, and I think that was really emphasized with that Cody segment recently.
And whenever Jey comes back, I mean, that's a potential storyline that they can tell as well. That again, Jimmy, yeah, that might again offer like a shot at being in a big program that's full of story and full of depth, because he already has had several of them. But to me, those are the things that separate just your kind of middle of the pack guys from your very, very top guys.
I agree with you. It's that secondary title level that LA Knight, Jey Uso, they benefit from having a championship at some point. Just because they can't just be the guys that go to the main event and lose and go back to the beginning and rely on the crowd. And and they're both super talented and super over. There's no doubt. So, but appreciate your thoughts, guys. As always, have a great weekend.
You too, Eric.
The call. Thank you, Eric.
And it's a stronger title now. I'll just say for the IC title, like it's not this consolation prize. Like the IC title is now something of value for that level to strive for. Like that will be, Sami Zayn's title is now going to be like that much more focused upon. They have put the time in to make this an important title.
Yeah, you'd hope that they'd be able to maintain it. So let's see. Let's go up next to Andy B. Welcome, Andy.
Hi guys, how are you doing? Hope you had a good week.
We did, Andy. We hope you did too.
Thank you so much, guys. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about the closing angle to Dynamite this week, and I can't think of a bigger cocktail of emotions than what I felt describing it. I think initially we have to say it felt desperate, right? Like it felt like a bit of a blatant ratings grab. That being said, because of that desperation and Jack Perry and Tony Khan's performances, I was able to find something equating to Gallows humor, and I had like a hearty belly laugh watching that segment. And I don't know what, I feel compelled to watch it again next week, and it's going to be something I'm going to be talking about like come the end of the year, I'm sure. They're going to do something with Kenny Omega next week, and when you look at the buzz coming off of it, it feels like a successful angle.
I mean, you can't really judge the success of it till we know, till we see what happens, and like if this drives a number next week, and more importantly where they are several months from now with this angle. But it was definitely designed to be a major angle. It was certainly not designed to just be some like 1 week shock to just hot shot a number. We'll see if it's successful. Like I thought, I was reserved coming out of it. Like I thought overall, like again, I'm going to judge all of this based off of Jack Perry, and I thought he came off very effective with the return on Sunday and this angle. Like he felt like this is a significant role for him, and he is surrounded by main event talent in this group, and we're going to see like if he can hang at this level in this heel role as well. Like they have not done any kind of physicality with Tony Khan. Like they they're doing it here, and we'll see if it's effective. But yeah, it was a polarizing angle for some, but I certainly was more on the open-mindedness coming out of it.
I generally sense positivity coming out of this angle. I mean, maybe if people were divided, it was about whether or not they found it serious and heat-getting, or if they found it comical and something that they could laugh at. But in general, I felt like people were entertained by it and they were talking about it. And I think for me, like overwhelmingly, it was a good reintroduction of this new version of the Elite, and specifically Jack Perry. So clearly Tony Khan is pretty proud of the angle in order to continue selling it throughout the NFL draft. So I have to think that he was pretty happy with the way it turned out. So yeah, we'll see if the ratings reflected on Wednesday. Thank you, Andy.
Could I also just touch on one more thing? So I thought going into Dynasty, like one of the problems with that card, and of course the show turned out well, but one of the card problems for me getting into that card was like a lack of characters and like angles and dynamics that you could like where you could like invest into somebody and like root for them and root for a particular outcome. And I think that completely switched up on this episode of Dynamite with that Mercedes and Willow Nightingale angle, because Willow is like this perfect, beloved, likable baby face. And in Sasha Banks, you have this incredible foil for her, because here is the big star coming from WWE who's been on Star Wars, who is a product of the NXT system, which is in some ways produces athletes who are meant to be the antithesis to everything the wrestlers in AEW are supposed to be. I just think that's such a fascinating dynamic, and one that I'm like really excited to see how it plays out in the Build to Double or Nothing. That segment alone sold me that pay-per-view. Thanks so much, guys.
No, it's a dynamic that like wasn't necessarily planned for. I mean, the only reason why this match is happening is because Willow happened to be the opponent next to Sasha Banks, or sorry, Mercedes, when Mercedes got injured in that match. The fact that they happened to have that character dynamic between the two of them, and the fact that they could find themselves in the same company right now to be able to do this rematch, I think is just maybe a bit of a bonus that they have this, personality contrast. So I do hope that they play it up. So much of this I think has already been built even before, any television was done to sway people the other way. All right, let's go up next to Brian. Welcome, Brian. Hey.
Hey, good evening, guys.
Good evening. Hey.
Yeah. Thanks for all, again, I say this almost every week, but thanks for all the coverage and all the reviews, especially this Hustle Rewind Away. Fantastic stuff.
Thank you for listening to
tonight's, yeah, absolutely. And tonight's draft episode was a good reminder of how utterly boring I find these draft episodes most times. The only times these were really all that interesting were the first few, when you had the GMs that were feuding, be it Vincent Flair or Heyman and Bischoff, and like definitely sense some animosity in like choosing who they were getting or who they were getting through the Tumblr when they had that. So the only real thing I have to add about SmackDown is I think the Cody and Hayes spot they were going for towards the end was trying to follow that fairly recent trend of guys colliding with their signature moves, which we saw Danielson and Ospreay do twice at Dynasty, and also Trick and Ilya do on Tuesday at the end of their match. So how a actual collision could have happened, I'm not entirely sure, but hopefully we won't have to find out later. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get to, like, if enough people are asking those questions, I'm sure there'll be some clarification soon enough.
Yeah, but it's no big deal. I thought it was a totally fine match. I'll just add that regarding Tony Khan's line about WWE today, I think that was today. That Cedric and Company PR firm that is representing Vince.
Yes,
one of their former clients was Harvey Weinstein. So maybe there was some strategy behind what Tony was saying there.
Yeah,
so
this was the PR firm that Vince McMahon is utilizing, Cedric and Company. They were hired by Harvey Weinstein in October of 2017, and then Cedric and Company dropped Weinstein in April of 2018. But yeah, you can look at like the list of clients. It's like they've represented like a wide range of people, but there are a lot of contentious figures in there as well. And there was that connection that people made too with the Harvey Weinstein thing. I think more so it's like Harvey Weinstein is all over the news this week because of this rape charge being overturned as well. So it's like he is he's a pretty hot button issue over these last 24 hours. And now you are attaching kind of WWE to his name, at least in the wrestling circle.
Yeah. It's also important to note Weinstein's still jailed or still imprisoned in California on a separate charge.
Yes.
yeah, that's all on that sketchy situation. But yeah, thanks again. And also wanted to clarify my Dynasty feedback. When I said the ladder match, I thought was bowling shoe ugly. I wasn't necessarily talking about botches. I'm just talking about like the car wreck aspect of it, where
Gotcha.
Guys were just getting too dangerous for the sake of the match. I mean, we've seen dangerous ladder matches before, but this one I felt like Matt Jackson nearly died twice. It's just getting way too nuts, and like the fans chanting "Please be careful" towards the end of it. Yeah. So that's all I gotta say about that match. But otherwise, I thought Dynasty was a super pay-per-view, and looking forward to where things go. And I'm happy that Swerve is gonna get to cut a promo at the start of Collision, presumably to get off of that lead-in from the NBA. So that's super. And yeah, just a lot of good stuff to look forward to. Hopefully, good stuff to look forward to. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks
Brian.
as always, Brian.
Just on that note, the Observer reporting that Dax Harwood suffered a concussion in that ladder match at Dynasty, but seems to be doing much better. All right, let's go lastly to Eddie in Long Beach.
Yeah, correct. Hi, guys.
Hey, Eddie, how you doing?
I'm done. Hey, is Adrian Newey getting drafted to Ferrari?
Have they announced? He's definitely leaving Red Bull.
Definitely leaving Red Bull, but there's a lot of speculation of just the breadcrumbs of like Lewis Hamilton falling in their lap, and now this is, it's just the domino effect seems to be favoring Ferrari, which is really interesting.
Very interesting indeed. Absolutely. I actually aren't following as close as you might, but I hear Nico Hulkenberg is going to Audi now. Is that right?
Yeah, I feel bad for Zoe because I don't know what's going to happen with him at Stake. I hate that name, but
yeah,
the team.
They'll find somebody. Where do you think? Carlos Sainz is ending up?
I don't know. People are speculating that he's. What I've read is like take a year off and then wait till the Audi team starts. That's what I've heard, but there's not a lot of seats for him. I definitely think he's outperformed Leclerc this year, but it's a wait and see. I mean, maybe he takes a year off, but he's also maybe worried just about other competitors. There's a lot of young talent in F1 right now, so interesting to see. I had a wrestling related question for you guys. I saw on Reddit today, this morning, about speculation that WWE was interested in Britt Baker. I didn't catch you guys in the beginning of the show, so pardon me if you guys brought this up, but that WWE is interested in Britt Baker and Ricky Starks, and I was just wondering a couple things. Like, there's a couple layers to this. The implications.
You might have to condense your question just because your audio is pretty poor quality.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. Just wondering what Britt Baker's status is, and if there's any implications of whether or not Adam Cole also, if this affects his contract status, because I know that Triple H, is a big Adam Cole guy. So just curious about that, because it's fascinating that we haven't seen Britt Baker in some time.
Well, with Britt Baker, I mean, she's been on the sidelines for months at this point. So, I mean, that gets into, like, I don't know what her contract status is, but you always have the caveat, and this would go for Adam Cole as well. Like, when there's injuries, there's always that potential of time getting tacked on as well. And Adam Cole's had, several injuries during his relatively short AEW run. And as I recall, like, Adam Cole, when he came in, like, he signed for years, as I would have to double check, but I don't think he has a deal coming up anytime soon, but I would have to verify that. I don't know about Baker's status, but I mean, there is that fact too of that she has been on the sidelines for some time.
Yeah, nor do I know what report Eddie was speaking of, and I've been unable to find it on Reddit, so I don't know if you could read anything into it. It didn't seem like it was any sort of major headline that was spreading around, to my knowledge. Hey, thank you, John Kleinchester, in the chat room for informing us that we have a few extra supplemental drafts to report.
Oh, let's get them out there. Where's Ivar going?
Breaking news, the draft continues. Cedric Alexander and Ashante the Adonis have been drafted to SmackDown. All right. Followed by Alba, Fyre, and Isla. They are moving to Raw.
Whoa.
So
that's
big
a move.
change there. I think
they were on SmackDown.
I think both of these are actual. Well, actually, Cedric and were they on SmackDown? I don't know. It doesn't matter. And then we continue. Baron Corbin is coming back up. He's drafted to SmackDown, so he leaves NXT. And then on a separate show for Bron Breakker, by the way. And Ivar staying on Raw. Then we've also got the OC, Gallows Anderson, Michin, all going to SmackDown. I think they were there already.
Yeah.
With AJ.
I think so.
So leaving NXT at the very least. And then we've got Shayna Baszler and Zoey Stark.
And Zoey Stark on Raw.
On Raw. Well. Staying on Raw.
Edge of my seat. So anyway, the world, it's before and after April 26th.
Everything changed. Yes.
Yeah, it's ricochet of just epic proportions. All right. Well, we have a few pieces of feedback here, and then we will call it a night. We are going to go to Benjamin, who says that Tony Khan leveraging the profile and visibility of the NFL draft is a smart move, channel change from all the recent bad publicity. As classically carny as it is, the camp of it feeds a fun, offbeat spin about AEW into the national dialogue, in a similar capacity to how WWE is using WrestleMania and the new era to move past Vince McMahon's persona being tethered to the WWE's public identity. I like that Tony was all in on selling the gimmick. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think there's something admirable about like somebody who's that committed that he'd be willing to go to his real, like much more high profile day job, selling the character. It's amusing. And you know, if he had not done it, I don't know if anybody would have criticized him, but I actually respect him a bit more for keeping up with the character. Let's go to Nas from New York City, who says, genuine questions. Has any draft ever been good? Maybe the first one? My memory escapes me. This one was worse than any recent ones I remember just because my expectations were much higher. I'm now convinced that drafts can never ever work in pro wrestling. Somehow SmackDown managed to pick a guy that they called up 2 months ago from the developmental brand ahead of a guy that main evented their self-proclaimed biggest WrestleMania ever against The Rock. Even in kayfabe, it doesn't make sense. Everyone stayed where they were.
Well, going back to the drafts, I mean, yeah, probably some of the earlier ones were more interesting. How about this one? This was like the first like complete Paul Levesque booked draft. Did you find any meaningful changes or differences beyond like past years?
So other than the rules changing and like the champions no longer being eligible to be drafted, that might have accounted for like I think the lack of eventfulness of this particular draft.
In trying to make it more logical, it did take some of the drama away, and the biggest name was also removed in the first segment in Roman Reigns. Like that was the biggest name for this night as well. So that kind of takes, like when you looked at the pool here, like we were not getting any, you know, who was your biggest name? Seth Rollins of the whole night?
Yeah. Maybe for that reason, this draft probably even felt less eventful than previous ones. But beyond that, I didn't really notice that much difference between a Levesque draft. Now we've only seen not even a half of it. You know, we have 3 more hours of it to go on Monday.
That does have a lot of, you know, key names on Raw that are not champions, like your Punks, your Drews, and and potentially some more call-ups as well, which are interesting when they do. So we'll see as a whole what it looks like by the end of Monday. But yeah, I can't say tonight was some riveting dramatic draft. And I would contend I've always had like a higher hope for some of these drafts, just because not so much now, even though it like, man, you look at the scope of the NFL draft of how big it is, and even the NHL draft, especially in Canada. But when I was younger, like I thought the NHL draft, I was captivated by it. I thought it was like so interesting. I would read up on all the prospects, and then you've got GMs that are dealing on the floor and who's going to go first and how that will change things. And you just had, I just thought like it was like really compelling television to watch. And I don't know if WWE's ever truly tapped into that same level of just entertainment value that these can come with, maybe save for like the earliest ones when it was such a fresh concept and you really were watching it with the idea of we are creating these two brands, and you don't have the baggage of these brands that have been really just, the brand split had been watered down and was not this concept that people took with too much concrete rosters that were separated. So there you have it, everybody. That will conclude Rewind to SmackDown. But a shout out to all of those joining us live tonight. We are here every Friday night right after SmackDown at postwrestlingcafe.com. All members at all levels get access to the show and your chance to be the next Brian or Muggin or Hansi. And you can be calling in on Friday night as well. And we can chat with you as well. So we look forward to that. And we will be back next Friday night after the show in France. SmackDown in France.
That's right, yeah. So they'll be recording in the afternoon, I trust,
Yes.
and then unless we're on Cody Rhodes' schedule and just doing everything live.
The man can suplex many time zones in his way. Okay, so Collision Course is coming up Saturday night. It'll be a late show because Collision won't be starting until after the Celtics Heat game. So tentatively, approximately 8:30 Eastern is when Collision is going to be starting. So it's going to be a late one on Saturday night with 3 hours of AEW from Daly's Place.
Yeah, thank you, Sino and Kate, in advance, because it's going to be a late one for them.
Well, we've got to do the 3-hour block on Wednesday because it's scheduled to be Dynamite followed by a live Rampage on Wednesday. So a lot of these 3-hour blocks for AEW, and my senses are that a 3-hour block is coming at some point in the future, and a third hour of something. Why not?
Bring it on.
Let's go to 4. All right, that's it for us. Thanks for tuning in, and that concludes Rewind to SmackDown.